Hi everybody. Today I'm going to give a little tutorial on how to do a program or project safety, security, and health risk assessment. Before we begin, let me show you where you can find this updated template. So you go to Staff Security homepage, which is our security SharePoint site. This is the homepage. You scroll down. You see all these links here: program safety, travel safety, incident reporting, and crisis management. Under program safety, this is the first link, program risk assessment template. You click it. Once you've opened it in your SharePoint or in your browser, please do not fill the template right here. But before that, you've got to download it. Save as. And you've got to download it on your desktop before you start filling it. So here we are. This is the revised template, and anyone that wants to do a program or project safety, security, health risk assessment should please use the most up-to-date template. So let's look at page 1. This little box here asks you a few questions. Geographical area where the program will be implemented. Instead of writing countrywide, please mention the areas, regions, or LRPs where you will be implementing your program activities. Nature of work activities. Please do not list humanitarian program or development program or advocacy. Rather, unpack it a little bit. For example, you should mention things like community meetings, distribution of materials, working with children, and things like that. Anything that relates to your program, but try and unpack it. This question over here is about how many staff and volunteers are involved in program work. So please provide a number here. Also, you can separately mention how many partners you're working with. Risk assessment done by, mention the name of the person that is leading the process, but also other people that contribute to it. Ideally, this exercise should be done in a group. Approved by and overall accountable, that will be your country director or executive director. Date of last review and next review. Now over here it says that security risk assessment must be regularly reviewed and kept up to date, must not be older than 6 months. So when you develop it or when you review it the last time, put an estimated date of the next review, which should be within the 6-month period. Now this risk matrix. This table is really important, and I'll show you how this is used. So let's look at this actual risk assessment table. Let's look at the columns. The first column is threats or dangers. It could be safety, security, health, safeguarding, or any other threat or danger to your staff, partners, and programs. I have already filled it with some possible risks. Any mitigation measure that is currently in place. So if there is nothing currently in place, you could leave it blank. But if there are some mitigation measures already in place, please list them here in column 2. Please do not list any mitigation measures in column 1, because column 1 is really to identify threats or dangers, not mitigation measures. So column 2, you write your mitigation measures. Now, once you've mentioned your mitigation measures in column 3, you assess what is the likelihood of this threat materializing after putting in place these mitigation measures. And then, if this threat materializes, what will be the impact on your staff and your programs? Next column, any risk that is calculated to be medium or high, you should think about what additional measures must be implemented to lower the risk further. Each action should have a deadline and a person responsible, and also a budget as to how much it'll cost. Now, if this is clear, let me give you one practical example. Let's look at risk number 3. The threat is staff are burnt out or stressed due to increased workload, lack of support or leave, or due to family situation. And this in the context of COVID and our humanitarian response, where we know that some staff may not be getting time to go on their annual holiday. They may be stressed because of what's happening in the world and also in their communities. Some staff may have illness in the family, or some staff may even be having some illness themselves. So all those factors would contribute to burnout or stress. This is a legitimate risk. Now, what measures are in place to mitigate this risk? Is there anything in place? Discuss with your team. You might have put in place mandatory breaks and mandatory time off for staff that are working in the front line in the communities. You might even have HR checking in with the line manager and the staff quite regularly. You may even be creating awareness through emails or training for staff to identify signs of stress and burnout. And you might have also made available for staff professional mental health and psychosocial support services. So all these are hypothetically the mitigation measures that you already have in place, and therefore you write them all in column 2. Now, after you've put in place all these measures, what is the likelihood of this threat of staff burnout and stress still materializing? Let's go to our risk matrix. So with these mitigation measures in place, what is the likelihood of staff stress? Seems less likely because you have put in place some really good mitigation measures. So the likelihood has gone from highly likely, which is common in high-risk environments, in high-pressure environments. The likelihood has been reduced to less likely, which is 1. However, if staff get stressed, that will affect their work and also their well-being, and in turn, it will affect their safety and security. So therefore, if the threat materializes, the impact is going to be very serious, or in some cases, somewhat serious. So let's take, for example, very serious. Less likely 1, very serious impact 3, 1 into 3 is medium. So 1 into 3, likelihood 1, impact 3, this is medium. Now, this column over here says that all the risks that are medium or high, think about additional measures that you could put in place to reduce the risk. Is there something that you can put in place? Now, that's where you discuss with your other team members that are helping you with this risk assessment. Maybe you could have a staff retreat. You could also support staff with healthy recreational activities, hobbies such as painting, drawing, sketching, reading, walks, photography, anything. Is there anything else that you can think about? If so, please mention it here. If there's nothing that you can possibly put in place on top of what is already in place, then that's okay too. But now, staff retreat. You need to mention in the next column, by when will it be done? Let's say 30th November. And who is responsible? Let's say line manager. And support staff with healthy recreational activities. You've got to be more specific, but this is just an example, so I'm just keeping it broad. But when you do this, please try and be specific as to what recreational activities. Again, write by when, let's say by 2nd of December. And who's responsible? Let's say HR. And how much budget would you need? Well, let's say you will need £200, and then for recreational activities, you might need, let's say, £450. This could be in your local currency as well. So this is one example of how you do a risk assessment. just so you understand how this is done, let's look at risk number 16. This is about travel. The National Travel Protocol does not align with the minimum requirements set out in the Global Security Policy, which means one or more of the following is not in place: health checks, vaccinations, prophylaxis, first aid kits, psychosocial support, medical and travel insurance, and the rest of it. So now in the next column, in the mitigation measures currently in place, you would check against each of these bullet points and you would mention what is in place and what is not in place. So let's say first aid kits are not in place, but everything else is available. That's good. So what is the likelihood of your national travel protocol not aligning with the minimum requirements? The likelihood is not low because you're not fully compliant. So I would say it's somewhat likely, which is 2. And what is the impact? Again, it's either very serious or somewhat serious. Let's, for instance, we take somewhat serious. 2 and 2. 2 and 2 is 4. Again, that's medium risk. So the likelihood is 2, somewhat likely. Impact is somewhat serious. And it's 4, which is medium. Now, coming to this column, it says for any medium or high risk, put in place some additional measures. So what are those additional measures? In this case, it's quite clear. You have to make sure that first aid kits are available and everyone is trained in first aid delivery. By when and who is responsible and how much it will cost. Let's look at another risk. ActionAid's incident reporting protocol is not in place or only partially in place, which means one or more of the following. There are no clear protocols for incident reporting, and if there are, staff have not been informed of them. Staff engaging in official work or travel do not have reliable means to report incidents immediately or ask for support. Most incidents go unreported, and if they're reported, it's casual or less formal and not followed up by proper investigation and corrective measures. And other. So you might also ask yourself, well, where are these standards coming from? So these standards are coming directly from the Global Security Policy, and you could click here the tips that I've provided in some of the columns, and you could click here and read ActionAid's Incident Reporting Protocol, and all of these bullet points that you read here are directly informed by this Incident Reporting Protocol that is then informed by the Global Security Policy. So if all of these measures are in place, you could say fully in place. If some of these measures are missing, that you could just mention, most are in place except for such and such. Now, again, here you would say likelihood of you not adhering to the security policy or to the incident reporting protocol is somewhat likely because you're only partially compliant. So that's 2. But then the consequence could be very serious. So it's 2 into 3 is 6, which is high risk. So the likelihood is 2, impact is very serious 3, and the total risk is 2 into 3 is 6, which is high risk. And how do you know? You know from this table. Likelihood is 2, impact is 3, 2 into 3 is 6, it says high risk. So if the risk is high, you're supposed to put in place additional measures. Anything that's missing from this checklist, you've got to then put that in place, mention by when, by who, and how much budget you will require for that. Please also note that it's very unlikely that these risks would be non-applicable to your context. And if they are, please provide a justification as to why you feel that a certain risk is not applicable. Now, having said that, there are certain risks that can be very, very context specific, and they're not the same or uniform across the board. For example, petty and violent crime. Well, it may vary. It may be very high in some areas and not so high in other areas. Kidnap and abduction of staff, it may not be a risk everywhere. Risk of terrorist activities, again, context specific. In these risks, you can mention if something is not relevant, and then you could explain why the risk is not relevant to your context. This is the only part of the risk assessment where you could safely state some risks as not applicable. However, from 1 to 22, in my understanding, most risks would be relevant to most of the contexts. So I hope this short tutorial has helped you understand this template and to carry out this exercise in a more informed manner. If there are any questions, please do get in touch with me. Thank you.